Hey everyone, I am so excited to share with you two upcoming opportunities to grow yourself personally and professionally. I've got two new virtual workshops that will be coming up in January 2021. You can choose either one of them. One of them really has a focus for personal and professional growth for women, and the other one is going to be a focus on time management, which is, I know it's one of the things that I hear so many people say is they need help with learning how to manage time better. And so both opportunities are going to be virtual via Zoom. That's a wonderful thing about technology, is we can reach people all over the place, all over the United States, all over the world, through virtual sessions that will help us grow. I'm going to be covering the material from a couple of my different books in each of these workshops, and you're going to get the copy of the book themselves when you register for the workshop. So two great opportunities coming up. I know you're interested in developing yourself in personal growth, and these are going to be some great opportunities to do that. So looking forward to seeing you all on the workshops. You can get details on both of them, find registration information, all that good stuff. Go to riastory.com/workshop. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fearfully and Wonderfully Me podcast, a podcast designed to help you become the woman and leader you are destined to be. I'm super excited about today's episode because I have a special guest. Rachel Francine is our guest today. And she's got some cool concepts and things to share that I know are really going to add value to you. And so I know I learned some things from her, and it's just kind of super exciting when I can invite someone to come on the show and really add value to you as well. So a little bit about Rachel. Rachel is a frequent speaker on building preferable futures, innovation best practices, women in technology, and music as medicine for such diverse organizations as the United Nations Professional Golfers Association, the Association of Professional Futurists, and the American Society on Aging. Rachel began working in interactive technologies in 1996 as a member of the CitySearch.com New Markets team, and she spent over 15 years converting brick and mortar products into scalable digital solutions for companies like Ticketmaster, Cars.com, Warner Brothers, the Dallas Morning News, collegestudent.com, and Al Gore's Current TV. Rachel was disappointed with the trajectory and goals of the commercial technology sector. So in 2009, she earned a master's degree in futures studies from the University of Houston with a focus on transformational economics in order to build organizations that produce quadruple bottom line results. Upon graduation, Rachel co-founded Music Health Technologies, whose award-winning product, Singfit PRIME, brings music as medicine to over 500 long-term care communities in 43 states. Rachel has been featured in Forbes magazine, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and the Houston Chronicle, and Fast Company. Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Ria, for having me here today. I really appreciate it.
I'm excited about our conversation, and I know I first talked to you about a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
And just since, and that was a fabulous conversation where I've just, I want to dig more into some of the things that were shared in your bio, the SingFit
Mm-hmm.
particularly, and things like that. But since that conversation just a month ago, you've had some very exciting news. You recently won an award. Tell us about
Mm-hmm.
that.
So yes, October was definitely a big month in terms of awards. I guess I won one that was the She for All pitch competition, and it was really about women who started a business after the age of 40, and their criteria and their theme was really reinvention and resilience. So
Hmm.
that was what I won that one for, which was very nice. And then my company won one, which was from the Leading Age Organization of California, which represents not-for-profit senior living communities, and they gave us an innovation award earlier in the month. So yeah, there's been some nice highs in 2000 in October for me, which we don't get that many of right now. So and just in terms of everything that's going on, so they were nice days, definitely.
Yeah, it was awesome. So I want to dig into the Oxytocin Advantage, but before we
Yeah.
go there, tell us about Singfit because I absolutely love the concept. And when you're sharing with me, I was like, oh, wow, that just resonates on so many different levels. So
Yeah.
tell us what Singfit is.
Sure. So with SingFit, what we're doing is we're scaling music as medicine. And the way that we do that is we've digitized an evidence-based music therapy practice. And this is, and speech therapists as well. And what this is it's where a speech therapist or a music therapist actually feeds the words of a song to a singer right before they need to sing them. And the reason that this is important is because singing has a lot of different kinds of benefits, both neurologically, physiologically, and also, did I say neurologically? Which would be the funny one not to have said, right? And neurologically. So, for example, this technique was used with Congressman Gabriella Giffords when she had left hemisphere brain trauma. And because when you have left hemisphere trauma, you frequently lose the ability to speak because speech takes place primarily in the left hemisphere. However, singing takes place in the entire brain. It uses a lot of redundant systems. So even
Mm,
when you can't speak, you can often sing. And so what a music therapist or speech therapist, somebody who's good with music, will do will excuse me, occupational therapists who integrate music into their practice will do is they'll play a song and then they'll feed the words of the song right before the person needs to sing. This is what happened to Gabrielle Giffords. And then brain plasticity takes over and actually reroutes where speech takes place in the brain.
wow.
So the challenge is that there's only 7,000 music therapists in the country, and only a limited amount of speech therapists who know how to use music effectively, and that's a shame because in addition to sort of the neurological benefits of singing, you also get there's also a neurochemical benefit. So it releases serotonin, oxytocin, which we're going to talk more about today, endorphins, dopamine, all those feel good chemicals that we try to really manipulate to make into anti anxiety and antidepressant and antipsychotic drugs. So it also has respiratory benefits and immune therapies and all of these kinds of things, immune benefits. And so what we do is we take the SingFit app, and then we have deals with all of these music publishing companies, everybody from Sony and Peer and BMG um, uh, and Universal Music. We have deals with them, and so we put all of this music that fits this prompting process into an app, and then we create protocols and trainings around specific conditions to achieve certain goals and benefits for people who have that condition. So right now we're focused primarily on dementia and cognitive decline, but we're moving out also into Parkinson's and general population health and well-being as well.
Mm.
So that may have been a slightly longer answer than you were looking for, but that's what we do.
No, I mean, it's just awesome because, I think most of us can relate to, music is something that we turn to that makes us feel good. You have your favorite song, it just always makes you feel better. Or,
Hmm.
you turn on the music and jam to it while you're cleaning house or running but it's cool to see and see kind of that there is a science behind, hey, this is why it's good for us and how can we
Exactly.
use that for the people that we love. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, we definitely have what we do on our side, but and just in general right now, people listening to music is great, actively making music. So even if you're, maybe not in our direct demo right now, which is over 65, singing on a regular basis for you, however you do it, making music is great. As what it's worth a little extra effort
Hmm.
from a mental health standpoint to do as well.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's yeah, I love that. Now, being an entrepreneur and kind of creating music health technologies and Singfit, that was kind of, you came by that naturally from what I understand.
Yes. Yeah. So the idea for Singfit really and musical health technologies really originally came from my dad. My dad, as I wrote in this blog when we won the leading age thing, my dad is what kind of we called a crazy inventor. Now it would be much fancier, and he would be a serial entrepreneur. But he had tons and tons of different ideas all growing up, and one of them stemmed from he sang opera. He was an opera student, and he used to sneak off base in New Jersey for basic training and go to his opera lessons in New York. And there's a guy on the in the opera, at least in those days, because this is the 60s, who would actually prompt the words of the song to singers right before they needed to sing them if he knew they were weak in the lyrics there. So my dad, being sort of the the crazy inventor that he was like, I want the opera prompter in the car with me. I want this little electronic gadget. I want this thing. And of course, Steve Jobs was like 5 years old, and we were
Mm.
still like cassettes were still the new wonder thing, right? So it wasn't like the tech infrastructure was there. And so, yeah, my brother and I say basically that my dad genetically engineered us to bring this idea to fruition, and he and socially. And I really went into technology, and my brother, um, due to really the very not tragic because he's alive and fine now, but at the time, very challenging accident of a friend of my brother's when they were about 19, who was in a coma with brain trauma. And my brother discovered music therapy and became a music therapist. And so while my dad did have some inkling about the benefits of music as medicine and singing as therapy, Andy actually went and studied and became one of those 7,000 music therapists. And he came home one day and was like, that weird lyric prompting idea of dad's, it's
Mm.
actually used, for everything from, people on the autism spectrum to, increasing mood, for people with anxiety and depression. So we decided at some point, we all sort of came together and said, it's time to make this thing happen. And we did.
Wow. There's so much that goes into um, creating a service and a business like this, and it's kind of ongoing. I can imagine that. I mean, it's not something you can create once and then walk away from, right? I imagine that this is an ongoing
Yeah.
an effort from all of you.
From all of us. I mean, we have a very hardworking staff who there's about 10 people on the team now, and I guess 10 people on the team, and yeah, now everybody's working from home. We do still have an office, and one person goes into the office because we do, strangely enough, as a technology company for our the right now we're launching a new product, but our first product was aimed at the senior living communities, and we send them things every quarter. So we're like,
Mm.
we're still kind of old school in that we still have to have space to be able to do that. So one of our staff goes in every day. But yeah, it's an ongoing, um, not only wanting to make the product better and better and the solutions better and better and make more of them, and then also added on to that, unfortunately our customers, clients, they are serving people who are 65 plus, who are
Mm-hmm.
the most vulnerable to COVID. So we're sort of having to constantly adapt to that
Mm.
as well. So it's actually revealed some great opportunities as well. So that old saying,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Well, tell us, because when you and I talked about a month ago, and I love to talk about SingFit just because maybe because I like music, it just resonates with me so much.
yeah.
So I mean, I'm fascinated by that. But during our conversation, in fact, it was toward the end of our conversation, you said something that I was just like, oh wow, it's spot on, because I talk about, not as a feministic statement, but I like to talk about, particularly in the podcast, that women have a natural strength toward being caring and nurturing, and that's a strength in leadership because leadership is based on relationships, and women just
Mhm.
naturally tend to be more relational. And so you had the most awesome term for that. So tell us about that, because that just gets me excited.
Great. Yeah, so I always say I'm like just enough of a nerd to have a favorite neurochemical, and mine is oxytocin. And one of the things that we touched on in our other conversation too is I have this weird master's degree in this thing called future studies, and it's the study of the probable, possible, and preferable future. And part of it is about the study of change. And I came to know about oxytocin then, and it actually connects with Singfit because singing produces oxytocin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but to get to the core of it is oxytocin is a neurochemical that both men and women have. Women have it more abundantly, and it is sort of the corollary to testosterone, if I may say that. And it's this idea that and women has testosterone too. Women have testosterone too. They just have it in lower levels of men. And this is really what it takes to like um, go out there and kill the saber-toothed tiger and win, and really be able to really be able, it causes people to want to build and make really great leaps, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is a great part of life and living, and everybody should want to do those things as well if that's on their side. However, oxytocin is what they call the sort of love neurochemical, but it's also that trust and connective neurochemical. And so women produce it the most when they're pregnant. So it's what connects mother
Mm.
to child in vitro. um, and and then it also is, once a child is born, sort of that feeling of connectedness that mothers report of having with that newborn baby. It's really because they're giving off these really high levels of oxytocin, especially potentially even more if they're breastfeeding, because that's one of the other things that releases oxytocin.
Mm.
And so, but the thing is there's other ways to get oxytocin besides this, which is the good thing about it. It's just one of the most potent. And so we produce oxytocin when we pet animals, just simply, holding hands with somebody or giving, somebody a hug. Also, physical touch releases oxytocin. And that's a big part of what has mental health professionals really concerned right now, because people are really missing a lot of that touch, which releases, oxytocin and makes us feel good. It makes us feel socially connected to things.
Mm.
And so you also get it from eating chocolate, which is why maybe many of your listeners are maybe feeling, greater chocolate urges than normal lately. And you get it from singing, you get it from interacting with animals. That's why people have one of the reasons that people have such deep connections with their animals is because not only are they producing oxytocin, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the animals are too, although I actually don't have the scientific backup for that. That might be our projection on my
Sure,
part.
sure.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways to get it, but
Yes.
women tend to get it and give it in higher levels.
Yes, and this is the thing, is that we just have it more naturally in our systems. And so the way that I talk about this really in context of business is I call it the oxytocin advantage, because like what part of the reason that I mentioned future studies and also testosterone is that part of the challenge that I think is going on in the world right now is that economics has been has been very, I prefer to use the word testosterone rather than like using male or men, just because I don't want to blame it on all men.
Right,
Right, we
right.
want to, right. And so but this very sort of testosterone driven idea of I must win, it's a zero sum game. And
Mm.
I talk about it in terms of single bottom line economics, that the idea is that the only way to measure your success is economically, right? So in the state of California and a lot of places, when you create a company and you take investment, you are actually legally bound to make money for that organization. That's supposed to be your absolute first priority.
Oh, wow.
But that, right. And so that ignores, is what I'm doing not good for society? not good for the health of our ecosystem, and all
Mm-hmm.
of these kinds of things. And it's not to say that you, but the point is that most people give some attention to all three, but we can also see those cases where they're really not, right? Where people are really just looking at that single bottom line. And so the single bottom line is challenging. It is challenging for several reasons. One of which is just that everything gets, so for your, well, for from a perspective of a government economy, if you're talking about a single bottom line, then everything that's even wrong with that society goes into that single bottom line, into that GDP. So our gross domestic product includes car crashes and people needing to be in hospitals and more PPE equipment. It means, it looks like we're spending a lot of money, but it doesn't mean that we're doing really great job to provide really nice lives for people.
Mm.
And so I think that when you talk, so 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 while we may have a lot, we really don't necessarily have, like, Bhutan measures its sort of self, not by gross national product, but by gross national happiness, right? Are people happy? Are they fulfilled? All of those sorts of things. And so I think that women in general, and or let's say when people have a lot of oxytocin, let me put it that way, when people lean into their oxytocin, because I do know men who lean into their oxytocin,
Mm-hmm.
more than others. When you lean into that, you're more willing to communicate, cooperate, come up with what's best for everybody. And one of my favorite statistics on this comes, from from Congress, from I think 2017, where where basically women made up 25% of the Senate, and yet they got more bills brought to the floor, they got more bills into committee, and they got more bills passed than the 75% of men. And I think this is because, like you were saying at the beginning, we're more willing to sort of work together to come up. You have the tendency, I try to be very politically correct when I talk about these things. We have the tendency to want to create, I think, what is called a preferable future, right?
Mm.
And we have more of an alignment on what that is. So in future studies, we talk about the probable, possible, and preferable futures. So the probable future is the future everybody thinks is going to happen. So in the 1950s, everyone always thought computers would be in it as big as a room.
Mm-hmm.
But there's all these possible futures being built, whether it's through technology and miniaturization, or whether it's through legislation and new laws getting passed about the internet, whatever it is, the environment, economics. There's all these possible futures being built, and sometimes we can see that, like, sometimes they don't happen exactly the way that we thought, and then they don't go so well either sometimes, right? Like, we all thought the internet, when we were building it in 1996, we were like, this will democratize the world.
Mm.
And then you get companies that actually, are helping to, do the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I really like is preferable futures, right? And this is the idea that either on your own, or more practically as a group, you come together and you decide what is that preferable future, right? And usually people want kind of the same things if you can get them to speak the same language, which is the really difficult part.
And that's where
um,
trust and connection comes in.
and that's where trust and connection comes in. That's exactly right. And so, people are willing to sit and listen and not have to, necessarily dominate or correct or, re-explain in some way that might cause issues. And so, yeah, so I have a lot of, I try to have a lot of faith that, we will be able to stick true to these sort of methodologies and stick true to our oxytocin advantage, and not necessarily, I mean, I just, remember all of the, big shouldered suits, the women who my mom worked with, right? Like, you can still wear a big shoulder suit. It's very fashionable. But when women in the 70s, really had to emulate men, at least in dress, in the workplace, I think that we don't necessarily need to emulate men, or the masculine or the testosterone in the way that we do business, and that we can create a more preferable future that way. But sometimes that means giving stuff up, right? Like it might not be as much money. Theoretically, it's possible for there's ways that we can still have the abundance and the things that we want, but we just have to think about how we're creating them and how we're designing them so that they're not also detrimental.
Mm. So one of the things that I talk about is because women are just a little more relational, they have the, more oxytocin. There's also a need for us to balance that with getting results, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we want to get along, we want to get along with other people, but we also, especially when you're in business or working in someone else's business even, I mean, there's a need, the business might not exist solely to make money, but to
Yeah.
be a business, you do have to make some money.
Yes,
How
you
do
do.
women, yeah, how do women, or what's your advice to women to how to balance that relationship with getting results?
So the thing is it's a very load it's a very complex question is what I would say. It's a very interesting and complex question because I think that um this I so what are results, right? So I
Mhm.
would have to sort of break it down that way because that really means different things for different types of jobs,
Mhm.
right? So, if you are, I'm just going to go right for the like, you are like a hard driving salesperson who has, goals for a month, and it's this very sort of vigorous thing. That's different, let's say, than somebody who is working in a job where their metric, right? Their
Mhm.
metric is, can you bring this kind of group together?
Mhm.
Right?
Right,
In
right.
order to, right? And so when you talk about how do you balance that, I think the ideal answer to that um, is I'm going to give a shameless plug, if you don't mind, for Joanna Bloor, who actually is the person who initially connected us. Um,
I had
Joanna,
Joanna on the podcast. It's been
oh,
several weeks ago, but yes, her
so so
potential.
So yes, and so to me, if you look at Joanna's work and the work that she's doing, she's really trying to help people figure out who they are and what they want to do, right? Because that way, if you are more aligned with what it is you want to do, then I think your question, which is like, how do you balance needing to get results with that oxytocin, well, or let's say with your own neurochemical balance. Like I'll give a very random shout out to this woman, Mandy Cole, who I worked with years and years ago, and she is like the most. She has a married name now too, but I think that might be her married name. But anyway, she's one of the most phenomenal salespeople that I've ever met. So, my and so is Joanna, right? So it's not to say that obviously that women can't do those jobs, but you have to figure out like where your balance is for what it is that you want to do, and that's what Joanna does. It's just like a fairy godmother and potentialist.
Yeah.
Um, but so I would say that would be like the ideal. However, we don't all have access to Joanna, although she does have a lot of content on the internet. Um, but but if you are in a job and you're finding yourself kind of conflicted between that, I think that oh, the old answer is um, you just have to be better at your job
Mm,
than other people, right? And I know this isn't necessarily what people want to hear,
mhm.
um, but but I think that sometimes, as women, we do have to work harder. I think that that's the old school legacy answer, and it still holds true. But I think that also the secondary answer to that is learning how to speak other people's languages.
Mhm.
I think that if you are able to, sometimes a lot of things are really more miscommunication. And I have this very funny situation where I have these meetings, and there's three other people in the meeting, and it'll be the let's say the center person is presenting, And sometimes they'll present in one way, and the one of the other people will come out and be like, that was the worst meeting I was ever in. And the other person will be like, that was the best meeting I was ever in. And then the next week it'll be exactly the opposite. And I'm like, it was just in the, and I just sit there and listen, and it was just in the way that he was communicating. And I learned this at City Search, which is, at City Search, I was an editor. And these were city guides, like Yelp written by people who got paid to write,
Mhm.
essentially, in
Mhm.
1996. And even within a creative department like that, even those, you can use a lot of emotional language in those
Mm.
situations, right? And then, I believe this is the way to go. I like this better. This just feels right. And editors are like, okay, right? Like, male editors, female editors, you know what I mean? Like, everybody would sort of accept that language. And then I had to go talk to the engineers, to the guys who wrote the code. And they would just kind of stare blankly at me when I talked emotionally, or they wouldn't understand what I was saying. And I realized, oh, I just have to be very factual with them,
Mhm.
right? And so I guess to some extent, some people would potentially call this maybe code, in the vein of code switching. But I think when you're talking about your job and wanting to do well at it, I think sticking to the guns of, this is the reason why it's better to do it this way, right?
Mm.
Like, we may gain, lose it. Let's just say there was something. It's interesting because all of the statistics point to, um, women leaders do better on the revenue front. They do better on the social impact front. They do better on a ton of these fronts. It's just not necessarily perceived that way. And so I think it's just really, sticking to your guns about what you want to do, but just figuring out how to communicate it with people. Is that a
Mm.
really long way of communicating that that would be one of my things, is don't change who you are, just learn how to communicate it in a way that other people can understand and appreciate.
Mm. Yeah, and it's kind of some of the same things that Simon Sinek talks about in Start with Why, right? Finding your why and bringing that into living that out in some way really helps you be authentically you. But once you find that, you've got to hold on to it and be unapologetically you, authentically and unapologetic for it. And not
Yeah,
because you want to run over someone else, but just
yeah,
one of my favorite quotes is Howard Thurman's, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do that, because what the world needs is people who've come alive."
yeah. I mean, it's very true, and you're gonna do your best work that way. I always, I do, I am a little bit, what makes you come alive, and but also making sure, and this is just my own personal, there's a thing called a normative futurist and an applied futurist. And a futurist who's applied is usually working for a company, so whatever their ethics and morals are,
Mm.
is what that futurist's ethics and morals are. I'm more what's called normative, which is I come to the sort of table with a set of with a set of ethics and things that I've established, right? And Hazel Henderson, who's a mentor of mine, who's in her 80s now, calls this, your electronic bird whistle, right? It's absolutely defining who you are in such a way. Joanna has different ways that she talks about this too, but Hazel talks about it in defining, who you are so specifically that that people, only people who are ready to hear that or want to hear that will sort of come your way. And so the reason that I'm saying this is, I do think it's about finding what it is that makes you come alive. I think that the state and place of the planet, though, also requires us to think about what's going to keep not necessarily the planet alive, because it'll stay here after us, but human beings that will allow human beings to thrive,
Mm.
on the planet as we do what makes us thrive. Because a lot of us, I mean, there's there's sometimes things that we can do that make us come alive that aren't that great for the world at large. And I do not mean to sound, high horsey, and certainly there's things I can always do better in my life and be better at. But I do think that that is something that the people need to. The great thing about it is you can probably still do that thing it's just you have the need to think about how to do it and not just say, oh, I'm gonna, let's say, start a clothing company, but not worry about, are there are there you know is there child labor that's working on this?
Mm.
Is this adding
Yeah.
to the, you know what I mean?
No,
So
I
I
see what
agree
you're
with
saying.
you. I agree with you. I think the sentiment is correct, but I think a lot of people don't think about it in a thoughtful
Yeah,
manner.
I
Yeah.
agree with you, and I honestly think when we find our true calling, it's got to be helping someone else, right? Our true purpose in life has got to be giving back, I think.
Well, I think
Um,
you have a lot of oxytocin, and that is why that is your answer.
maybe
And
so.
and not everybody, there are a lot of people who don't think that way, and that's, why, frankly, what they call, like, sin stocks, right? So, and I'm not saying these things held in individuality are a particular sin. I have no no judgment. It's just the term of the thing. But things, like cigarettes and, alcohol and gambling and all of those kinds of things, those do better than regular companies a
Mm,
lot of the time, right? And so the people who are doing those things, like, all in moderation, I hold no judgment to anybody, whatever, it gets people through the day. But just that term of, hey, look, are you creating cigarettes that are gonna give people cancer? A lot of people are okay with that, and they
yeah.
do that. And again, no judgment, especially if people need to support families. I get
Right,
it.
but it's hard to think that that's your God created calling.
Exactly.
From
Exactly.
from just my opinion. So, Rachel, that this is awesome.
Okay.
Anything that I didn't
Uh,
ask you relative to an oxytocin advantage that I should have asked you?
um, I think the thing that I would say is no. I think you asked me all of it because I think that I probably went yes. Here's the one thing you didn't ask me, but really I could have answered it at any time, which is, when you asked, sort of advice about how
Uh-huh.
do you make
Yeah.
these things happen at work, is I would say, keep in mind it's not easy.
Hmm.
You won't be able to do it every time. You know what I mean? Sometimes you're gonna lose at it, and not be able to convince people. And some of those are really low stake little, hey, you're batting around an idea, and yada yada, and okay, you can't, whatever your, let's use not non-toxic paint or something like that, gets pushed off the table, even though you were pushing for it, to things that have, a lot higher stakes. Sometimes we're not going to be able to get our points across, and that's okay, because it's in balancing your own personal need for home and safety and food and all of those kinds of things, which is perfectly legitimate, with, um I'm still going to put up the fight,
Mm.
right? But know that sometimes you ain't gonna win.
Right, and that's part of the learning and growing as
Exactly.
humans is unfortunately we learn sometimes we learn more from our mistakes and our misfires, but hopefully we are able to learn and grow and that's just the circle of life.
100%. The very last thing I'll say is my one of my favorite futurists and my professor from, the University of Houston, in futures, is I love the way that he graded papers, which is you would take these classes and you would turn them in and you would very rarely get an A.
Mm.
And then at the end of the semester, he would give you all your work back, or you would have it, and he would say, okay, now you can redo it based on everything that you've learned, through the semester, and then he would grade it again.
Oh wow.
And so, as long as you sort of put in some work, and put added some new insights, and saw that you were really paying attention, you typically end up with an A.
Mm.
And or it, I guess at least I would. I don't know about everybody else, but, I would typically end up with an A, and I would say that would be my approach to this kind of thing. I would think that's an approach to resilience, which is, no, you might not get it right the first time, but the more you learn, the more you practice it, the
Mm.
better you'll do.
Absolutely. And that's something I think as leaders, as women, as entrepreneurs, it's or not, it's something as people, it's something that we just have to be determined is try again and keep
Try
going.
again. I know, and it's challenging in these times. But I think the reality is people we need it more than ever. People trying to make the world a
Absolutely.
better place.
Rachel, thank you
Well,
so much for your time. I just know you've given us some gold nuggets to I've got to go back and listen and look at my notes and
yeah.
listen at all of the wisdom that you shared. So thank you so much.
Oh well, thank you so much, Ria, and hope everybody out there is well. So thank you so much.
Yeah. How can anyone get in touch with you if they want to learn more about Singfit or anything like that?
Yep. So it's all of the URL is just www.singfit.com, and then on social we are Singfit, all spelled out. So we don't really have an Instagram. I'm sorry. We'll get one. I started in social media, and the shoemaker's children never have shoes. So, but you can catch us on some of the other channels.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put the links in the podcast notes as well.
Yeah.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much, and congratulations again on the Luminary Award and the SingFit Innovation Award.
Thank you.
Exciting news, and take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye.